St. Thomas University Journalism present The Basement Files.
Hello, and welcome to the Stu Basement Files. I'm Mitchell Pearden.
And I'm Kennedy Bowden-Wells. Here are our top stories.
We look at how New Brunswickers are helping to keep their province green.
And how the definition of gender is changing with time.
It started with Kyoto, evolved into Copenhagen, and now Paris. Powerful political leaders around the world came together to discuss climate change and what we can do to stop it. The vast majority of resolutions and agreements from these talks have failed in North America. But the discussion has reached far beyond political leaders and into the everyday lives of the public. Danielle Elliott reached out to New Brunswickers to see how they participate in the environmental movement.
How many of us take scenes like this for granted? What if there were none, or very few left? How many of us think about the environment and what we can do to save it?
And this was actually a painting done from a festival that I was at called Rainbow.
Eden Sheffroth does think about it and worries about what we're losing and what she can do to save it. But she is just an individual. Environmental movements have been around since the Industrial Revolution. Originally, these movements were focused on the preservation of nature. Throughout the 1960s until the 1980s, the movement resurged with ecological protection groups like Greenpeace and concerns about the ozone and acid rain. Increasingly, we've seen more extreme weather. The movement that began such a long time ago has been revitalized. Janice Harvey is a professor at St. Thomas University in the Environment and Society program.
Until the last several years, when the climate change issue really becomes unavoidable and the public begins to really be uncomfortable with the fact that governments are actually not doing anything on this, and so you see a revival of grassroots activism around the climate issue.
A recent study suggests almost 80% of Canadians believe in climate change, and over 60% believe humans contribute to the problem. Over the past few decades, as a society, we've taken steps towards being more environmentally friendly, whether that's through recycling or moving towards more renewable technologies. Despite our efforts, Harvey says we all live with contradictions in our ways of life.
And we live in a society, we live in a culture, and a lot of our behavior, a lot of our actions are actually dictated by the system that we're stuck within. Very few people are prepared to or can sort of drop out.
Sheffroth is not one who's prepared to drop out entirely. For the most part, she's your average mid-20s Canadian. She enjoys reading and playing video games.
Stop killing me!
But for Sheffroth, minimizing her own eco-footprint and fighting against climate change and for environmental protection has been part of everyday life, even as a child.
I've always kind of been environmentally conscious ever since I was a little girl. Always, taking garbage that I found on the street and putting it in my pockets to throw into a garbage can later. Sneaking small animals into my bedroom, which my mother really enjoyed, I'm sure. And then as I got older, I just noticed a huge change in events. So this is the campaign office where the Green Party was working over the summer. It's kind of sad just to take a look in here and, see it all empty, especially after all the good memories that we've
Now, Sheffroth has her hands into a little bit of everything. She volunteers with soup kitchens and shelters, the Council of Canadians, the Green Party, and has started a green program for her work. But Sheffroth lives by the causes she supports. She chooses public transportation or walking for her errands in her commute to work. Whenever she can, she tries to shop locally. That means going to the farmer's market for all of her produce.
Instead of buying something that's shipped thousands of miles, costing Lord knows how much gasoline, It's something that's coming, straight from a local farm right to my table, which is, fresher vegetables, tastes a lot better, and it's also having a lot less of an impact on the environment than if I was to purchase something from California.
For her home, she enjoys products that aren't mass-produced.
Oh, this one smells really good.
Anyway, this frame, for instance, is the strapping off the roof of a barn called the Party Barn in Hapaw.
They're taking materials that were going to be thrown out anyway, and instead of contributing to a waste product, you're taking that waste and turning it into something new.
Wainscoting from the entranceway of the Petitcodiac Hotel.
I'm actually fine because I have a bit of a smaller budget, that this actually helps a lot. I mean, I went and got a week's worth of groceries today for about less than $20.
Chef Roth's also a vegetarian, partly because she loves animals, but also for the environmental benefits.
It costs a lot more to the environment to produce a pound of beef as opposed to a pound of vegetables.
Environmental scientists in the International Panel on Climate Change say that we're nearing a time of crisis. If that's the case, can Chef Roth and others like her do enough? Or is a larger societal change required? Do the actions of individuals even matter when a problem is so large in scale? Harvey says these people will not change the world all by themselves, though they do have a large contribution to make to their cause.
Understand that within your limitations, you're just going to do the best you can. Understand kind of the change dynamic so that you can actually feed in positively to the change dynamic, which is politically, in the sense that you've got to make sure the government knows what you expect them to do, because that's where the power lies right now.
I'm very proud of some of the things that I do. I'm certainly not perfect in any way, shape, or measure. There's a lot of things that I could do to improve. But I think that one of the major impacts to this environmental movement is bodies. We need to have more people getting involved in their communities. We need to have more people getting involved in their government and actually holding their government accountable. Because when you're just sitting around and not getting involved, you're expressing consent for these things to happen.
Chef Roth knows to make things happen, it will take large groups. But large groups are made up of individuals like her. Lots of them. And if they all pitch in, they can accomplish something that one person can't, and possibly preserve places like this for generations to come. For St. Thomas Journalism, I'm Danielle Elliott.
Transgender people have been making headlines more and more. From Chaz Bono to Caitlyn Jenner, the transgender community is alive and growing. Ben Krause explored the idea of gender in today's society and how the definition of gender is changing with time.
Boy, girl, male, female. Traditionally, gender falls within a binary, something made up of two parts, in this case, male and female.
Oh, this coffee is criminal.
Honey, you killed the petunias.
Then you admit it. Your coffee really is murder.
Today, the concept of gender has broken that binary. Gender roles have changed. The definition of gender itself has changed. Things aren't just black and white anymore. More and more transgender people are coming forward as public information and resources improve. A transgender person, or trans for short, is someone who feels their mental, emotional, and spiritual selves don't align with their physical bodies. Cam Harris Isaac has identified as trans for over 4 years and uses the singular they pronoun.
Yeah.
What do you identify as?
I identify as two-spirited.
What is that?
It's a First Nations identification. It's different for every nation, so depending on what nation you do talk to, they'll give you a different description of what two-spirited is, but for my particular beliefs, it is a individual who can experience the world in both a masculine and feminine way, or in a neutral way.
Harris Isaac says that gender can be expressed in several different ways, from a person's hairstyle to their interests.
For me, depending on how I'm feeling or how I'm acting, I'll be able to dress a certain way. I'll also act a different way as well. If I would want to be more masculine, I'm a little more gruff, or if I'm a little bit more feminine, I'm more calm and to myself.
Harper McAngus identifies as a transgender man. He sees gender as more than just what you are, but it can also play a big part in who you are.
I think it's just a way of expressing yourself, just another way of expressing yourself, because you have so many other options, and I think gender is just another way to do that. And just like every single person is different, I think every single gender is different too, and a different way of expressing yourself.
Angus says that strict gender roles are one of the main issues that transgender people face.
I think in society it's just very black or white still. I think it's getting better, but it is still very black or white, male or female. So I think that's a standard that people have to just kick in the butt.
St. Thomas University is home to the Queer and Allied Society, a group that offers educational resources for people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and more. The society also holds different kinds of events for the public, including coffee houses. Al Cusack identifies as non-binary, neither male or female, and is an executive of the group.
I feel like the way that I act as a leader is an important part of my gender, and my assertiveness is an important part of my gender, and sort of my role in the community has been a big part of the way that I express my gender, and also the way that I've helped to discover my gender.
Besides educational tools and social events, the Queer and Allied Society is a safe space to talk openly about gender, sexuality, and so on. Despite being an accomplished queer student, Cusack is still concerned about their gender.
I take on more masculine traits, but I'm in a bit of a personal crisis right now where I'm not sure if I'm taking on more masculine traits because I don't feel I'm trans enough, or if I'm taking on more masculine traits because I legitimately feel more masculine. So there's social pressures there that are definitely influencing how I'm going about expressing myself.
How can someone not feel trans enough? It's actually pretty common. The process of someone embracing their identity is called a transition. No two are alike, but a lot of them follow the same steps. Changing someone's clothing or hairstyle is usually first. Then come legalities, like name changes. Then comes the medical transition, like a trans man taking testosterone. A lot of people get judged for not feeling like they have to medically transition, or if they like their birth name. See, being transgender is kind of like having a checklist in front of you. If you don't follow the same steps as everyone else, are you really trans? Angus has chosen to medically transition. He injects himself with testosterone once a week. Using testosterone and hormone replacement therapy has many physical and emotional side effects, including facial hair growth, increased aggressiveness, a deepening of the voice, and changes to body structure and fat distribution. Doing the shot is a process with several steps. First, Angus attaches an inch-long needle to the syringe. Then he fills the syringe with testosterone up to his prescribed dosage. The syringe is flicked to get rid of any air bubbles in the testosterone. Angus then switches out the inch-long needle for a shorter one. This makes it easier to pierce the injection site, his stomach. The used needles and syringe are then put into a sharps container. Angus says that he takes hormone replacement therapy to feel more comfortable within his body.
Because I think a lot of people have the same answer, and it's mostly just to feel more secure with yourself. I mean, you can dress how you want without hormones. You can say what you want without hormones and everything. And like on the inside, you can say, this is who I am. But I think a lot of people looking in the mirror, it's tough when the outside doesn't match.
Gender is much more outside the box today, but not everyone has clued into this yet. There's still a lack of education on trans issues for the general public, which often leads to ignorant discrimination.
Gender roles are they're not important anymore. We're not living in the 1950s. There's so many different kinds of people out there. So why do you have to limit again? Just stop limiting people, stop limiting your mind, because once you limit other people, you limit yourself, and then you limit the people around you, and then they limit people. It's just a domino effect.
Cusack says the key to a world inclusive of all genders is compassion and respect.
I think by humanizing trans people and showing everyone that, you know, it is complicated, but at the same time, it's simply just people are who they say they are. And if someone identifies a certain way, then you just have to have that respect to believe them.
A member of the NDP proposed a bill last year to ban discrimination based on someone's gender identity. The bill failed to pass as law. However, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has promised to make trans rights a priority in Canada. For Stu Journalism, I'm Ben Krause.
Social media has been lit up with mixed feelings about the acquittal of former CBC host John Goff of charges of sexual assault. Support has risen in the favor of the victims despite the judge's decision. Many are wondering whether it will affect the criminal justice system as a whole. Jordan Mead Baxter explores the reactions among students and how this verdict might affect future sexual assault charges.
Shawn Goff's acquittal sent an uproar on social media. The former CBC host was found not guilty of charges of sexual assault and choking. Shortly after, people all over turned to their screens and started posting their opinions. Many criticized the way the court handled the testimonies of the female victims. I Believe Survivors and We Believe Survivors were two hashtags that became popular on Facebook and Twitter.
Initially, I'm kind of disappointed, actually. I think we need to move away from the assumption that we need to doubt the victim and start doubting the person that's actually being accused of it, rather than spending all the time in the trial trying to disprove what the victim saying happened to them. I think it's ridiculous that he was acquitted.
They're focusing too much on disproving the victims, and they need to focus more on their story.
Well, I wasn't surprised on the reaction of the victims because it's not their fault. They're stressed. It's well, if that would happen to you, how would you react, right?
St. Thomas University criminology professor Jean Savageau says due to the circumstances of the case, like the inconsistencies in the victims' testimonies, the judge's decision is something we have to live with.
You have to assess if they don't tell me the truth here and something that happened after having to do with this, how can I believe what they tell me about the act itself? And it may or may not have happened. He has to assess the truthfulness that he can trust into the witnesses and the victims in this case, and base his decisions on that, and that's what happens.
But the verdict isn't something people want to live with. Protests broke out across the country. People lined the streets and held signs to show their support of the victims.
We survivors! We believe survivors! We believe survivors!
And some St. Thomas University students backed them up.
Could be scared that if they are let out, whatever, they can go back at them. There's so many different circumstances that fear them. They're threatened.
And if there are some inconsistencies, if there's multiple stories, then you have to believe there's some degree of truth to it.
Getting the public involved is always a good thing because it usually helps move the trial, not necessarily the trial, but it helps promote knowledge on the subject matter, I suppose.
The system isn't broken!
Savageau says public reaction to decisions like this can spark a change in the system.
It was built this way!
Well, like a number of other decisions in the past few years, it does lead to some reassessment of what is it that we do in the justice system. What can we expect from a justice system? I mean, you may wish for all kinds of different things. People are people, and we have our limits in what we can do and reconstruct things and present evidence and to present them in a credible manner which will stand the test of the justice system.
Gomeshi will face a second trial in June. Though the verdict can be in favor of either side, many hope to see it handled differently than the first. For St. Thomas Journalism, I'm Jordan Mead Baxter.
Kids these days are introduced to technology as soon as they're born. But what happens when you're only introduced to technology as an adult? Senior citizens grew up with technology developing all around them. But did they actually embrace these new innovations? Cody Peters talked to seniors to see how and if they're integrating new technology into their everyday lives.
We live in a society that can't survive without technology. If we took the cell phone or computer away from any of these students, they'd probably have a meltdown and not be able to function proper. We rely on technology in this day and age. But what if you grew up without any technology? Seniors lived in a time that didn't have any of these modern conveniences.
This is the perfect family scene when Mom, Dad, and Junior all want to hear the same radio program.
So how are they adapting and embracing technology in their everyday life? Marilyn Nickerson grew up in the 1940s and had to do all of her homework in the evening by candlelight because she had no electricity in her home.
We didn't have any electricity until I was in grade 11, and We didn't even have a telephone. I had to go to the neighbors up the road to make a telephone call.
A lot has changed since then. Not only does she have her landline phone, but she has a cell phone and even a computer.
I do use the internet. I get emails. I can only do a few things. I'm quite illiterate when it comes to that computer, but I can do emails and I can get on Facebook, although I don't do a whole lot on it.
The convenience of the internet and social media has helped Nickerson keep in touch with a friend she's had for 62 years.
Oh, I started writing to my pen pal in Australia in 1955, and we've been corresponding ever since. We were both in Girl Guides, and we needed to have a pen pal in order to get a certain badge. And I requested one from Australia, and she requested one from Canada, and this is my pen pal Jennifer from Australia, and this is her husband Horst.
A lot has changed in the way we receive messages. You don't have to wait for snail mail anymore.
I write to her through email or on Facebook, so we get our conversations back and forth much more quickly. Used to take about a month for a letter to get there.
Texting, on the other hand, is not one of her favorite ways to communicate with her friends and family. She finds it more personal to talk to someone on the phone.
It's easier. I make too many mistakes this way. But sometimes the phone itself changes the words on me.
With the help of her notebook, she's been able to keep track of how to do a lot of different things with technology.
And it is overwhelming sometimes, because I haven't been able to keep up with all of it. But I'm satisfied with what I have learned.
Without question or fail, the largest concern for most seniors purchasing electronics is ease of use.
Malcolm Angus works for Cox Electronics. He said seniors are looking for tech they can keep up with.
They essentially buy everything that you would expect anybody else to buy. It's just their focus is always on ease of use and maybe less on, high-end picture quality or high-end, audio quality.
Angus says Apple products are popular with seniors.
A lot of their family members probably have iOS devices because, again, they're very popular with the younger crowds as well. So they trend towards devices where their family can help them kind of learn the ropes.
Family influence is playing a role in how many seniors are buying cell phones.
Generally, when we have a first-time cellular buyer in the store, it's almost always because, their daughter or their son would feel more comfortable if they had access to a phone to make emergency phone calls when they're in their vehicle or when they're out and about. But yeah, I think at this point, no matter what your age group is, cell phones have become an absolutely integral part of society.
And not just cell phones. Former teacher Stephanie Bishop was forced to adapt because computers were becoming an integral part of her job.
When I was teaching, we would do our lesson plans on the computer. And we would do maybe, you would look up, but you didn't do lessons per se or whatever. But now the computer, I think, is their right hand, basically. They do everything on their computers.
But she didn't always like using computers.
Some of the teachers were starting doing their report cards on computer. And they were having to go back to school if they didn't have a certain computer at home or a program at home, and oftentimes it wasn't working and everything. So I was one that said, I am writing out my report cards. When they buy me a computer, I'll do it on a computer. Well, guess what? 2 years before I retired, they bought me a computer. Not just me, all the teachers. So then I had to learn to do the report cards on the computer. And I will say, after I did it a couple of times, it was easier than writing them out by hand. Yeah. So I would admit that. It was easier.
One thing Bishop finds different in classrooms now are smartboards. Smartboards are teaching tools, where images are projected onto the screen and you can interact with them. Teachers are using these more and more to educate their students. Bishop had an interesting experience while supply teaching one day.
Smartboard, one of the other teachers set the smartboard up for me, and we were doing something, and I put the pen down, and then the smartboard wouldn't work. And I kept trying to get it to work, and I said, it won't work. Well, this little kindergarten child, who would be 4 or 5 years old, said, you put the pen in the wrong place. It has to be there. So I said, oh, sorry. So I put the pen in the right place, and it worked. Fast forward 3 or 4 minutes, and I needed to erase something, so I erased it out, put it down, wouldn't work again. I looked at this child, and I said, is it in the wrong place? Yes. So I had to put it in the right place. And that was only about 3 years ago, so there we go.
For St. Thomas Journalism, I'm Cody Peters.
This summer, the City of Fredericton will be releasing a long-awaited bus app to better service public transit users. Fredericton has had a bus app before, but this new app will feature the most requested tools by local users. Shawn Goff talked to the people of Fredericton and the transit manager about how the app came into light and when it will be rolling out.
If you live in the City of Fredericton, you may have experienced a late bus, or several. The city aims to change that with an app that will change how transit riders find out bus information ahead of time. Frederictonians have long awaited a new bus app, as cities like St. John and Moncton have had dedicated bus apps for years now. St. John residents can use NextBus on iPhone or Android, while those in Moncton can use an online trip planner. Fredericton Transit Manager Darren Charters says that the city is working with locals to create a unique app experience.
Sure. We're working with ReadyPass, who's 2 local UMB grads who came to us with a great idea. They pitched something to me that nobody else had, which was very intriguing to me. So we began working with ReadyPass. They are a local startup company. The City of Fredericton really likes to support startup companies. So we've been working with them since September to develop the product.
Before the City of Fredericton started working with ReadyPass, they had a bus app called GoFred My Transit, which was designed by CGI Atlantic. This app was for an older version of the iPhone, so it has been a long time since transit users have been able to easily access bus schedules and route planning. The implementation of a transit app is key for the city because it has 2.5 times as many transit users as the provincial average. ReadyPass Business Development Manager Alex Call says that research on current transit users was one of the things they took into consideration when developing the app.
I think people struggle with the most is actually the routing component. So figuring out where they want to go and looking at that map that, it's a little intimidating to look at that map for the first time. So we realized that the first thing we should focus on is building a way to make it easier for people to figure out which bus to take and when to get on.
To find out what transit users really want out of a new app, we talked to some of them.
I'd like to know if the buses are going to be late. Because a lot of the time when I go to work, I wait for the bus for like 25 to 30 minutes. Most days, so.
I think I saw something written about it, like that they were going to show in live time where the bus was going to be going, which I thought would be really helpful, especially for the winter, since sometimes you can end up waiting outside in the freezing cold for like 20 minutes. So it'd be great to be able to know if your bus is going to end up on time or 20 minutes late.
I don't know, like probably some GPS features just so I can see when my bus is actually coming, because I don't rely on their schedules too much. So I think that would be good. It would allow me to actually arrive when I need to arrive.
It was unanimous. Transit users in Fredericton wanted to be able to see where buses are and where they're going to be. The city and ReadyPass said they already planned to implement this feature from the start.
Hardware, which is essentially a tablet which has GPS location capabilities, will give us a lot of valuable information.
While the app is only in its beta testing phase, ReadyPass is doing more research to find out what its app needs to succeed. It's going to launch this summer. For St. Thomas Journalism, I'm Shawn Goff.
For 190 years, New Brunswick's old government house has sat solid on the banks of the St. John River. It's served many different roles over its life, but has returned to its roots as home of New Brunswick's Lieutenant Governor. Chris Robinson saw how the building functions physically, socially, and politically after so many years.
On 11 acres just outside of Fredericton's downtown, the third oldest building in New Brunswick sits solid on the bank of the St. John River. It is considered a tourist attraction for Fredericton and is also open for public tours. The walking trail flows behind Old Government House, giving walkers a view of what those from the river would have seen in the early days.
This room was originally
the library in the glory days of Government House.
Principal Secretary to the Lieutenant Governor and ex-journalist Tim Richardson knows a thing or two about old Government House.
I maintain that the Government House in Fredericton is behind the legislature, maybe the second most important building in the functioning of the province, past and present. And tremendous decisions were made here at one time and continue to be. But what's remarkable about this building is how open and accessible it has become. In the past 15 years, we welcome about 40,000 people a year through the door.
While visiting Old Government House, Mr. Richardson was kind enough to give me a tour.
The very first British sovereign came to Canada, and it was a trip of significance because no other monarch had ever come to Canada. And so the dishes are fairly elaborate in gold with the crest of George. Grandfather clock that we have here in the drawing room is important for a couple of reasons. It wasn't original to the house, but it's a gift to this house because it was made in Fredericton at the time that this house was in its glory days. It's one of 4 original pieces that we have here at Government House. To think that it was sold at public auction for $12 back in the 1890s, it's worth about $250,000 now, is the original dining table made for this house in the 1820s. It was made by a gentleman by the name of Thomas Nesbitt, who came to New Brunswick from Scotland and came at the time when New Brunswick was a famous shipbuilding port. And a lot of guys, craftsmen like him, came here in search of a better life and came here to build ships. And then it wasn't too long after that the shipbuilding industry kind of fell out of favor because the steamship was introduced. And these guys who were working in places like St. John and St. Martin's and St. Andrews and St. George and St. Stephen building ships didn't have work done by the son of the governor of the day, painted in 1835 on January 1st. These were presented to the Royal New Brunswick Regiment, and one shows their troops' colors and then a list of all of the battles in which they took part. And so this may look like an antique tapestry, but in fact it's much more current, and it was to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the local Heritage Rug Hooking Guild. They took some artistic license and put in flags of the cultures, so there's the Canadian and provincial flag, the Union Jack, and the Acadian flag. And on the grounds are Acadians, First Nations, Loyalists, a reference to the Highland Games that currently takes place here on the grounds every summer. So it shows a collection of all cultures and how this place is, and what New Brunswick symbolizes, and how we should celebrate our differences. There's sherry glasses, Waterford crystal, donated by a woman in Fredericton who felt that she didn't need them, wouldn't use them, but maybe we would.
Recently, a new Lieutenant Governor has been appointed. Her Honor, Jocelyn Waugh Vuonneau.
I have 3 causes that I identify is the literacy. I would like to do something to improve literacy in New Brunswick, work with groups to improve literacy. And another one is family violence. I would like to talk about family violence and try to find ways to diminish this in the province, because it's something that exists everywhere in the province, at every level of the society, and I think that is something that we have to talk about. And mental health also. I would like to talk about mental health, to help people cope with mental health in their family, because sometimes you have family that they are feeling alone when they have mental health problem in their family. So I would like to help them.
Since becoming Lieutenant Governor, Her Honor's husband, Ronald Vuonneau, has had his life changed.
I used to be retired. Yeah. Before she became Lieutenant Governor, I was fully retired. You know, I was enjoying my retirement. But now I still enjoy what I'm doing, but I can't say I'm retired anymore because I follow her everywhere she goes.
Although the British monarchy may seem like something from days gone by, it still plays an important role in modern Canadian politics. Old Government House brings that history back to life, showing New Brunswickers a piece of their historic past. The home is open for tours at any time of year. You just have to call ahead and make an appointment. At Old Government House in Fredericton, I'm Chris Robinson.
That's the end of our show. On behalf of the third-year journalism students at St. Thomas University, I'm Kennedy Bowden-Welsh.
And I'm Mitchell Pearden. We'll see you back here in September with some new journalism.